Hey guys, before I begin with this video, I thought it'd be wise for me to do a little introduction as to what it is I'm actually doing. Now, for my birthday, I was bought a excellent book from my gorgeous friend Claire, and this is the book in question. It is The Ghost of the Tower of London. For those of you that know me, I really want to go to the Tower of London, and I love ghosts. I have wrote my own piece on the ghosts of Tower. In fact, somewhere amongst my videos, I think I did a video on it. However, Claire would like me to read from this book as it's very interesting. The book itself was wrote by a chap called G. Abbott, who actually was a beefeater at the Tower of London. So what's in this book is these words, and I'm going to basically read one of these chapters to you, and this chapter is about Tower Green. So let's begin. A central garden, sheltered by plane trees at the Tower of London, is known as Tower Green. It is bounded on the east by the White Tower and Chapel Royal of St. Peter ad Vincula. To the west squats the Beauchamp Tower, while its southern border is the Queen's House, originally the Lieutenant's lodgings, since 1530 the residence of the officer in charge of the Tower of London. In such a pleasant oasis it is easy to imagine the royal levees, the parties and merry-making which must have taken place here during the centuries when the Tower of London was a royal residence. Yet one small enclosure on Tower Green constantly reminds us that this is where the private scaffold stood. The 5-foot-high wooden platform, draped in black, strewn with straw, rare witnessed by the royal court and dignitaries of the City of London, perished those whose only crime was to incur a king's wounded pride or thought to be a dangerous rival. Before 1536, executions, even of women, were not infrequent. Infidelity, too, was hardly a rarity. Yet the punishment of death for alleged unfaithfulness, and that in the person of a Queen of England, was unimaginable. That such an event did happen has never ceased to horrify and appall subsequent generations. Anne Boleyn was the second wife of Henry VIII, and she had been Queen of England for 2 brief years, when she was accused of infidelity and treason, and sentenced to be either burnt or beheaded on the green within the Tower at His Majesty's pleasure should think fit. Confined in the Lieutenant's lodgings for 4 days, she was led out to the private execution site. Strangely enough, she was to be beheaded by the sword, a rare weapon of execution in English history, but infinitely preferable to the axe. The latter was a cumbersome and ill-balanced weapon, and its primitive design often necessitating more than just one stroke. Anne mounted the steps and knelt upright, there being no block when the sword was employed. The French headsman, black-clad, stepped forward, her attention being distracted by his assistant. Anne mercifully failed to see the flashing blade, as with one stroke her head was severed. In accordance with custom, the executioner held her head up high, and the gathered assembly gasped in horror as her eyes and lips continued to move. Her pitiful remains were ensconced into an old arrow chest and buried beneath the altar in the Chapel Royal of St. Peter ad Vincula on Tower Green. It is hardly surprising, therefore, that through the centuries of apparitions perpetuating to be those of the doomed Queen have been seen, even by those most prosaic and level-headed human beings, soldiers of the British Army. In 1864, a sentry of the King's Royal Rifle Corps, on duty at the Queen's House, saw, through the swirling river mist, a white figure. He challenged and received no reply, attacked only to drive his bayonet through the spectre. Being found in a state of collapse, he was court-martialed but 2 witnesses at the window of the Bloody Tower corroborated his story and he was acquitted. The phantom figure was seen by another sentry in later years, gaining the sentry post an evil reputation. Still, in the last century, a yeoman warder swore under oath to seeing a bluish form hovering, a shape which then seemed to move towards the Queen's house. Whilst in 1933, a guardsman reported seeing a headless woman floating towards him near the Bloody Tower. Within the Queen's house, long a prison for royal and important personalities, as well as being the lieutenant's residence, many an eerie experience has been reported. Across the ancient timbered floors walks the Grey Lady. Only a woman will ever discover a secret, for she has never been seen by a man. In the 1970s, the figure of a man in medieval dress was seen drifting along a upper corridor, whilst in the same decade, firm footsteps were frequently heard ascending a rear stairway. So convincing were these sounds that eventually 2 residents investigated. On hearing the measured tread, one resident went instantly to the foot of the stairs, and his companion went to the top. Slowly they moved along the stairs to meet no one but the other. Late in 1978, an American guest in the house heard religious chanting. It was midnight, and the faint music and voices continued for some minutes. Assuming it to be from a radio or some similar equipment, she mentioned it quite casually the next day, only to be told that no music has been played as late. The same slow religious chant has been heard on a previous occasion by a resident passing by the house. A room adjoining that in which Anne Boleyn passed her last few days has a particularly unhealthy atmosphere, being noticeably colder than other rooms in the house. A particular perfumed smell lingers in the air, and such is the brooding menace of the room that no unaccompanied girl or young child is ever permitted to sleep in it. For in the past those who have woken to feel that they have been slowly suffocated. Across Tower Green is the Chapel Royal of St. Peter at Vancouver, and an incident some years ago of lights burning therein led the officer of the guard to investigate. Peering in through the window, he stared unbelieving at the spectacle in front of him. Along the aisle between the tombs moved a procession of spectral figures, knights and their ladies. They were led by a female who, he averred, resembled Anne Boleyn, and they moved towards the altar beneath which her pitiful remains had been buried centuries before. Even as he stared, the vision faded and the chapel darkened, leaving the officer alone in the deepened shadows of Tower Green. Of the women who perished so violently on the private scaffold, surely none suffered more terribly, nor more undeservedly, than Margaret Pole, the Countess of Salisbury. Over 70 years of age, innocent of all crime, the Countess was slain as an act of vengeance by Henry VIII. The Countess's son, the Cardinal Pole, from the safe haven of France, revelled Henry's religious beliefs, retribution, and the axe descended on his mother. On the scaffold, the Countess proclaimed her innocence. She refused to kneel over the block, and she challenged the axeman to remove her head as best as he could. Pursuing her around the block, the axeman is said to have literally hacked her to death in a welter of blood. Over the centuries, it seemed as if her proud Plantagenet spirit still shrieks defiance to the sombre skies. On the anniversary of her brutal execution, a ghost is reported to run around the scaffold side, pursued by a spectral axeman, the bloodstained axe brandishing aloft. One night in 1975, personnel in the Waterloo block overlooking the green were roused in the early hours by the sound of piercing screams. This was confirmed by men on duty in the Bywood Tower, and a few nights later the guardsman patrolling the rear of the Waterloo block also reported that just before dawn he too heard high-pitched screaming from the direction of the green. But nothing was ever found. Could it really have been the death cries of the hideously mutilated Countess? And there I shall conclude the story. My thanks to Claire for getting me to do this. I hope she enjoys it. I hope you all enjoy it. And that's it for now. So I'll be back at some point with either a makeup tutorial or a vlog or a tag, or something crazy. You know what I'm like, guys. I just seem to do random stuff lately, but it's all good fun. Now, you take care of yourselves. I'll see you all soon. And until then, ta-da!